Fields of Green for All was really honoured to attend African Drug Policy Week last week in Cape Town. I was there with some of the members of our team, and this auspicious occasion was brought to us here in South Africa by some really important organizations. This was drug policy information, knowledge, discussions, debates, really at its highest level on the African continent. The people that were represented there came from all different sectors of people who use drugs, people who advocate for changes in drug policy, people who advocate for harm reduction and human rights. So the 4-day event was brought to us by TB HIV Care, and thank you very much to the amazing Julie and Sean for really pulling this event off so successfully and also at quite short notice. It was also brought to us by the Love Alliance, which is a health and human rights AIDS organization, SANPUD, the South African Network of People Who Use Drugs, NACOSA, who are the networking HIV and AIDS community of Southern Africa, the Global Fund, PEPFAR from America, the South African National AIDS Council, the International Drug Policy Consortium, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the International Network of People Who Use Drugs, the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, Harm Reduction International, and our very own Department of Social Development. So with all of these organizations involved, we were certainly in for a very, very interesting 4 days down in rather rainy Cape Town. The opening plenary was quite an event, as the keynote speaker was our former president, Mr. Kaklema Motlanthe, and we know that he sits on the Global Commission Against Drugs, and he gave us a very moving and very frank speech on last Monday evening. We will be going into a bit more what he said in the blog that accompanies this video, and we'll put a link to our blog in the description below. Really, the Drug Policy Week was about 3 things. It was about human rights, and it was stressed over and over again by all sorts of people, but in particular from Mohammed Mutala, who was from NACOSA. He said, human rights are not just a set of principles. It is an obligation on the part of governments to uphold these rights. So human rights was certainly central to our 4 days down in Cape Town. Another thing that was incredibly important was this issue of harm reduction. And we attended various events, plenaries and side events on this subject of harm reduction and how to advocate for harm reduction. And then also very, very importantly, there was lots to be said about budget advocacy, because all of our organizations are really, really struggling for funding to keep going with our various initiatives within our communities. And the thing about Drug Policy Week is there were people there from the communities, people who work in the communities every single day. This wasn't just high-level academics. It was people with a lived experience, people who use drugs, people who advocate for sex workers, people who advocate for harm reduction facilities such as needle exchange programs and opioid substitute therapy. So every one of us needs money in order to keep going. And those in our cannabis community know that it's absolutely crucial that we change the law. And that is why Fields of Green for All is always struggling for money, just like everybody else in the room. So we participated in 2 major events over the 4 days. The first one was with our team from Cannabis Africana. Now, we've held an event in Cape Town before with this project. It's a project that is run by University of Cape Town and the University of Bristol, with representatives in Nigeria, Ghana, other African states, and certainly in South Africa. I also went to Cologne, Germany, for the African Futures Conference in June with the Cannabis Africana team. So it was really nice to get together with everybody, and I'm sure that photographs of that event are going to be coming out through Drug Policy Week. The Cannabis Africana event was all about the patterns of cannabis consumption throughout Africa. So that was an interesting one, because never before have I been asked to stand up and speak about actually using cannabis. The event was chaired by Simon Howell, our expert witness from the Trial of the Plant, a criminologist from UCT. Simon guided the conversation. I was also joined by Kelly Fortune, who wrote her master's in public health about the Umzimvubu farmers. And she actually joined Jules and Mark Emery when they went down to Pondoland. And that was when she spent some time with the Umzimvubu farmers doing her research. And we will certainly in our blog give you a link to her master's thesis paper. It's very, very interesting reading. And then we were joined on the stage by Nati Ferreira, who has become part of the Cannabis Africana team and is certainly part of the Fields of Green for All team now. Nati was speaking about actual consumption as related to traditional use and cultivation of cannabis. So that was a very interesting event. It was actually a side event. We were side by side with the UNODC event, but we thank those people who were at the conference for joining us in our side event. And then I was invited to speak at a plenary, which is where all of the attendees at the conference are in the big room. And this was a decriminalization panel entitled "Be Careful What You Wish For: Lessons from Decriminalization from Around the World." Thank you very much to Sean Shelley, who chaired the event, for guiding the conversation. And I was joined at the podium by Simon Howell, speaking about our private purposes bill, speaking about the judgment from 2018 and the broader implications for drug policy with that Constitutional Court judgment. Sean certainly had a lot to contribute when it comes to the conversation about decriminalization. I certainly made it clear that cannabis is not decriminalized in South Africa, although we do have this judgment, because we still see the police raiding people's homes and businesses with no really reason to do so, given our judgment. And then an auspicious guest all the way from Canada joined us on the panel. His name is Jason Eli. We will speak about his various credentials. He used to work for the UNODC, and he's been very connected to drug policy circles. And he spoke about what has happened in Canada and lessons from Canada, how not to legalize. They still have a big challenge when it comes to the consumption of cannabis. It can only really be consumed in the privacy of your own home. They don't have private clubs in Canada. So while all seems to be rosy in Canada, I think that at the end of the day, the legacy farmers have been affected greatly. There hasn't been that much of a reduction in their so-called unregulated market. And there certainly are challenges in Canada. It was great to meet Jason. He's quite famous in drug policy circles, and we'll tell you more about him in our blog. Now, Fields of Green for All was really honored, as I said at the beginning of this video, to be part of Drug Policy Week and to really represent the cannabis community on a stage that is so much more than just about cannabis. It's so important for us to participate in this drug policy work. When we see in the cannabis community that some people are somewhat myopic and some people think that cannabis isn't a drug. People think that cannabis is somehow better than other drugs. And we've always said all the years, Jules and I, that cannabis is a drug. And don't think that you're better. And harm reduction is for everybody. And there will be no drug apartheid in South Africa. During the closing ceremony, we heard from the Department of Social Development, who you will remember were the people protesting outside court in 2017 in Pretoria. So that was somewhat ironic. And then Sean Shelley, who brought this whole event together with his team, gave him a very moving closing speech. And during that closing speech, he brought up a picture of our cannabis team. And he said how proud he was to see me and two very high-ranking members of the South African Police Service sitting at a table and having a very animated discussion. And yes, I met these two policemen. They were very interesting. I did inform them about the huge problems that I have with the police. I was very frank with them, and it was interesting to be able to give them feedback as to what is happening out there, because they have absolutely no idea. They also have no idea that we can't have limits on the plants we can grow. We can't have limits on the amount we're allowed to keep for our personal possession. So I was asked by these two policemen to please not share the selfie that I took with them, because, as you can imagine, it wouldn't be very good for them. But I can say that it was certainly a very interesting conversation. And I'd like to thank Sean for referring to us as the cannabis community in that closing speech, because it certainly gave myself and the Fields of Green for All team a lot of hope when it comes to the bigger picture of the re-legalization of cannabis in South Africa. So thanks again to the Drug Policy Week team, and look out for our blog. Do have a good read and inform yourself, because as the good people of drug policy say, it is not just say no, it is just say no. KNOW. Arm yourself with education.